Real estate is booming in certain areas, even though overall economic factors have declined significantly. Is there a bull market in housing? The truth is that it depends on where you look. Foreign investment has been primarily responsible for the housing market boom of many areas around the world, including Vancouver, Los Angeles, and Manhattan. Using basic calculations, we can unequivocally confirm that the price of real estate in these areas and many others are entirely overpriced for those actually living in these cities. Mainstream media says boom. The money GPS says bust. And that's why you came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to talk about China and the US. But first, let's get to this. We're talking about UK blue chip firms told to stop reporting every quarter. This is laughable, but let's take a look. The UK's biggest institutional investors are to demand that the FTSE 100 companies stop quarterly reporting as part of a radical shakeup of how shareholders interact with their investments. If you'd like to see all the details, that's up to you, but I'll cover a couple points. The IA, whose members own approximately 1/3 of the FTSE 100, will tell boards to move from spending time focused on 3-month numbers to work on long-term strategy. So, of course, long-term. Let's just, 100 years from now, we're going to report. Keep their shareholders in the dark. That's an excellent way to do it. Keep the mainstream media in the dark and have only a very select few individuals report information to the mainstream media where it's all filtered and everything else. Why in the world would you want to keep your shareholders in the dark unless there was something to hide? And that's exactly this. They're coming at this time right now when we're seeing so many countries around the world, so many corporations around the world hurting. So isn't this a perfect time to hide information? Well, of course it is. And this is a joke coming right here as we are getting ready to admit on the government levels that there is another recession occurring. But of course, that will be hidden. And they'll figure out ways. If you want more information, read Frank Partnoy's book, Infectious Greed. It's incredible. It talks all about this. Now, for some reason, I couldn't zoom in on this, so I'll just cover it quickly. But the port in this remote northern Australian outpost is a little more than a graying old wharf jutting into crocodile-infested waters. On a recent day, there was a stifling heat, not a ship in sight. And they're talking about basically a bad economy here. The financially hurting government of the Northern Territory was happy to lease it to a Chinese company in October for the bargain price of $361 million, raising money for local infrastructure projects. We are the last frontier. You take what you can get. And this has happened with many countries. Look at Greece. Struggling to survive, they sold off many of their assets. That's just one example. One very good example. You look around the world, anytime you have austerity measures, people believe that the austerity is a good thing. Some people believe, of course, austerity is a good thing because you need to cut back if you're spending too much and everything else. But ultimately, you need to see the bigger picture here. Wherever there are losers, somebody's winning. Now, it could be a natural event, but it also could be contrived. And I'm not saying that's what's happening here. I'm just saying Rahm Emanuel said that you need to take advantage of these crises. And that really brings up the point here. When you have countries around the world struggling, cities around the world with depressed housing prices, perhaps their businesses are falling down, and you have people with money ready to spend it. But that vacuum that's created at that point could bring in interests that you may not necessarily want. So that's the danger. I'm just pointing at the danger, that's all. What's the best way for a country like China to exert its influence over the US economy? Acquire American-owned companies like Chinese-owned Haier just did when they purchased General Electric appliance business for $5.4 billion. So much for an American independence and authentic Independence Day celebrations on July 4th. And this article is just talking about the fact that corporations are being purchased by foreign entities. How so? The more Chinese and other foreign companies establish ownership of American assets, plants, and factories, the more they have the right to demand how our U.S. economy is run, because how it is run affects them too. And that's what happens. You have corporations right now that lobby governments to pass laws in their favor. But primarily, of course, not all, but primarily owned by American either shareholders or what have you. You have, a general sense of the real estate, the businesses owned by people who live in the country. So they have that country's best interest at heart. But over the years, you can see that the charts, that's changed. And, that could be a natural event, of course, but at the same time, it could be something bad, because look how bad the corporations who actually are from the U.S. are to the U.S. itself. And imagine you have another country owning much of the assets and the businesses of your country, wherever that is. All of a sudden, things start to change. So that's important to note. With real estate prices being so dramatically unfairly high, a lot of changes have happened over the years. You have people who are, let's say, between 18 to 35, who are living with their parents. Many people, after graduating, have to move back in or stay living with their parents for extended periods of time, all because the prices are simply too high. And this right here is talking about co-living. Right here, they mentioned the number of 18 to 35-year-olds living with roommates has doubled since 1980. Young people have always needed housemates, especially when times are tough, but this time is different. A new generation of co-living companies are trying to make shared housing a billion-dollar business. Interesting article if you'd like to read it, but all I'm trying to note is that people cannot afford the homes. People will say, I don't care, I already own a home. But this business of, millions of people wanting to get into the housing market but simply can't, what are they doing? Well, they're renting. I've shown you those statistics before. So, the housing prices going up, it's really not a good thing in most cases. That's the way I look at it, because if you already own a home, do you want to buy a bigger home? Well, now it's even more expensive. And if you can't afford a home now, real estate prices are definitely not good for you, because it only becomes more unaffordable because the amount of income doesn't increase at the same rate that these homes are increasing, depending on the city you're in. And this right here is just another article, one of many that you can research, but talking about the Chinese real estate price, Chinese buyers pushing up real estate prices. And this happens to be from the US, talking about areas of Dallas and Manhattan and other places. In my book, I talk about these statistics. For 20 years prior to the year 2000, a home would cost about 3 to 4 times the annual median income in Canada. All right, so you're looking at 1980 to 2000, 3 to 4 times the annual median income. Then, fast forward to today, or this is a few years ago now. This is from my book, so the statistics happen to be a few years old, but still very valid. As much as 11 times the annual median income. This level is historically abnormal and absurd, and it can only mean one thing: a bubble. That should have alarm bells going off for so many people, but of course not a concern for everyone who believes that their home is their most precious asset, of course, because it's their only asset in most cases, other than their retirement account, which will probably be confiscated at some point. Oops, I said that. Right here, you're looking at mortgage rates. This is in part why foreign buyers and buyers who have enough are able to purchase real estate, and simply that they are at historically low levels. You can't beat these prices right now. When you look at it through the interest rates, it just seems so cheap for people. Look, my monthly payments are so low, I can totally afford this. But what happens when interest rates rise just a little bit, just a couple percent? You're going to have mass foreclosures. But don't look at that. Put your head in the sand and ignore the truth. That's what they want you to do. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. If you found the video informative, you will find my book, The Money GPS, even more informative. If you want to, you can head over to Amazon where they have this look inside feature. It's going to allow you to flip through the pages of the book and see if you like it. Take care.